Welcome to NHT Radio Story. Behind the pages of history that have passed, there still remain thoughts and unanswered questions that haven't been fully satisfied today. Today, NHT Radio Story will join you in turning back the pages of history and the future regarding the great United States. Does America fear communism, or is communism a counterweight to the U.S.? This will all be covered in today's topic, Communism Inside America. Please tune in, dear listeners.
Part 1. A quiet fear in a loud country.
Before the Red Scare was red. America's relationship with communism didn't begin with the Cold War. It didn't even begin with Lenin. It began with something older, something deeply American, the tension between equality and property. Go back to the late 1800s. Industrialization was transforming the country. Railroads carved through plains, factories roared, cities swelled with immigrants chasing opportunity. But opportunity wasn't equal. Workers labored 12, sometimes 16 hours a day. Children worked machines. Tenements overflowed. Robber barons grew rich beyond imagination. And in that environment, new ideas began whispering across the Atlantic. Ideas from Marx, Engels, Bakunin, Kropotkin. Ideas of labor solidarity. Ideas of collective power. Ideas of workers claiming what they produced. To many struggling Americans, these ideas weren't foreign. They were logical. They were hopeful. They felt like medicine. But to the wealthy elite and to the political establishment, they felt like something else, a challenge. The labor movements of the late 19th and early 20th centuries, from the Pullman strike to the rise of the industrial workers of the world, weren't communist in the strict ideological sense, but they rhymed with communism's themes. Coal miners demanding a living wage, factory workers demanding safe conditions, immigrants demanding the dignity of a full human life. To the people fighting for those rights, it was simple moral clarity. To those in power, it felt like a storm gathering. And storms demand names. Theirs became radicals. Later, Reds. And later still, a word that carried the weight of 2 world wars, communists.
The first Red Scare, when fear found structure. Most Americans know about McCarthyism, the 1950s era of congressional hearings and Hollywood blacklists. But fewer people know that the first Red Scare happened much earlier, 1919 to 1920. And in many ways, it set the template for everything that followed. Picture America at that moment. World War I had just ended. The Russian Revolution was fresh and shocking. 8 bombs exploded across the United States, including one on the doorstep of the Attorney General. Labor strikes swept the nation. Immigrants arrived in record numbers. The country was tired, anxious, and looking for someone to blame. Historian Ellen Schrecker once said, "Fear is most powerful when the enemy is invisible." In 1919, communists were not invisible because they were effective. They were invisible because most Americans didn't know who they were, and the imagination filled in the blanks. Attorney General A. Mitchell Palmer launched the Palmer Raids,
arresting thousands of suspected radicals, most without warrants. Immigrants were deported. Homes were searched. Newspapers fueled hysteria with headlines like "Red Menace Rising." The irony? The actual Communist Party USA at the time was tiny, fragmented, and internally conflicted. But perception had already outrun reality. America wasn't reacting to an organized threat. America was reacting to the idea of one. That pattern, fear outrunning facts, would return many times in the decades ahead.
The Great Depression, when communism felt less foreign. When the stock market crashed in 1929, capitalism itself seemed to be collapsing. Unemployment soared. Bread lines stretched across city blocks. Farmers burned crops they could not afford to sell. And for the first time on a mass scale, Americans began to ask questions they once considered unthinkable. If capitalism could fail this spectacularly, what alternatives existed? If the system was broken, who had the blueprint to fix it? Communist organizers found fertile ground. They marched with the unemployed. They defended evicted families. They integrated workers of different races long before the mainstream labor movement dared to. They protested lynching when it was still considered politically dangerous to do so. For some Americans, particularly Black Americans in the Jim Crow South, communist writers and activists gave voice to injustices the government refused to acknowledge. The party was still small, but its influence wasn't in numbers. Its influence was in visibility, in symbolism, in the moral clarity of its rhetoric at a time when the official channels offered few answers. As the writer Langston Hughes put it, "Communism gave me a sense of hope when hope was hard to find." That didn't mean Hughes was a communist. He wasn't. But his words captured something deeper. Communism in America wasn't just a political ideology. It was a mirror held up to a wounded nation. McCarthyism, when fear became a spectacle. This is the part of the story most people know. Senator Joseph McCarthy holding up a list that kept changing, claiming he had the names of communists inside the government. Hollywood writers being blacklisted, professors being interrogated about their political beliefs, neighbors reporting neighbors, actors losing careers, families breaking apart. But McCarthyism wasn't just about politics. It was about performance. It was about the stage of fear. As journalist Edward R. Murrow famously said, "We must not confuse dissent with disloyalty." But in the 1950s, America did exactly that. Dissent became suspicious. Creativity became dangerous. Association became evidence. Communism wasn't inside America because of spies or secret plans. It was inside America because fear had taken root in the national psyche. Fear of infiltration, fear of subversion, fear that the American dream was too fragile to withstand criticism. And when a nation becomes afraid of its own shadow, it becomes afraid of its own people. The story doesn't end here. If you want to continue the journey of uncovering the hidden layers of meaning behind every event, be sure to hit the subscribe button.